The moon bathing's been used for hundreds, thousands of years in places like India and in places like Japan to soothe the menopausal symptoms because the lunar energy is cooling. It's the yin. Doing the moon bathing can be really, really calming and relaxing to all of us family members.
Welcome to the flow. I'm incorporating that right in because I want people to this community knows me well. And today I am so excited to bring this beautiful soul that I was so fortunate to meet through Dr. Christine Schaffner. So many of my friends come from, we love you, Christine. And Masami Covey is a brilliant weeby like me, wellness intuitive biological investigator. She has other terms that she uses, but truly she's incredibly intuitive. She focuses much like I do on the lymph and the fascia and the terrain and frequencies, but she has her very, very special spin. And I'm just so happy to share this time and space with you, Masami. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me, and I'm just so looking forward to this. So let's get started.
I love that you don't like labels like me. That was one of the things we spoke about before we started recording, and it's so important for people to realize that the wisdom that limits us, those labels, they start to get people pigeonholed. And I know that, like Masami, her practice has changed throughout the decades that she's been working with clients and on her own journey. And we can do all the things. We can do the supplements. We can do the overseeing the protocols and helping navigate the world of the dentistry and navigate the world of the body work and navigate the world of all the things. And yet, what's the overall message, Masami? Go for it.
Well, it's the flow. I mean, you're the flow queen, and it really is. It's like, stop going upstream or try to stop the flow. Or, anytime you try to stop the flow of this thing called life, you're going to create more algae and, stinky water, and then the disease can start to happen. So the flow, really. And, my feelings about labels, I mean, so people need to know what have I studied and where do I come from and so on and so forth. I understand that. But I grew up in Japan, right? I was born and raised there. And my father was the only white man in a city of 1 million people. And my two other siblings and myself were the only mixed kids, okay? So we have plenty of labels for kids like me. So that's why I have really hard time with people labeling me as this or that. Yeah.
Makes sense. That totally makes sense. And I'm sure you had to learn flow at an early age with all that resistance. As I try to teach people that their life is chaos, right? And our job is to create harmony out of this chaos. And that sounds to me like very much a fish out of water, so to speak, and very much like everybody pushing against you to try to push you into something because we get uncomfortable when something's different, right? Or we don't understand something, especially with our bodies. We try to suppress it and get rid of it and try to overcome it. And what have you learned throughout your years of practice in regards to that? And how maybe has that changed from maybe where you started and where you're at now with clients?
Right. So, I think there's these three words in Japanese that maybe I will briefly talk about it. So the first concept is called shu. Shu is S-H-U, shu. And shu means to go with what you're being taught. So like you study with really good group of people or teachers or maybe certification programs or schooling or whatever. So you stick with the shu. Shu means there are ways that you need to learn the basics. So it's like I think of like a Maslow's pyramid of the how we go up the pyramid kind of the thing. But the basic needs, which is you do need to learn about biology. You do need to want to understand about physiology. So the basic needs are there. That's really difficult for us to tweak it too much or change it too much. There's certain things. If you're going to eat a bunch of sugar and then go to McDonald's and, wash that food down with the Coca-Cola, you're not going to do well. So those are kind of the basic stuff. So you learn to shoot for a while. And you stick with the teachings, you maybe expand it a little bit more, you go into depth within that. But the next thing is ha. And it might take you a decade to get to ha. It might take you 15 years, 20 years, but the ha is to start to break. So you start to break free of the shu. You start to break free of that teachings. And then you start to explore your own energetic fields. You begin to expand into the quantum fields. This is when sky's the limit or not even the limit. Okay. So, and you begin to find a connectivity. But you're still playful around it. You're just starting to break the boundaries. You're playing with your own boundaries, as well as the teaching of the boundaries. And so you were doing it for a while. So I've been eating right, this and whatever the right is at the moment, right? And these supplements, these protocols, this kind of detox, this kind of a cleanse, and you go through all that, and then you start to break free of it. You start to play around with it. What's going on within me today that needs different support than what I was taught. And then go into the third stage is shu ha. B is R-I. B. I know it sounds like a between L and
R-I. V.
No, R.
R-I.
Like a rain. Yeah, rain. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great.
So, but it sounds almost like a D and L and R mixture sound. That's the Japanese sound for D. Okay. So D means that you actually move on or step out of that zone or the path, and then you start to walk on your own path that is different, maybe parallel to the other teachings, but it's your own journey that you begin to walk on. And I have to say that I was doing shu for a long, long time. I started studying the body in late 1990s. And then I became a yoga teacher and Pilates teachers and started studying about essential oils and the fascia and yoga therapy and all that. After I got my master's in international business and MBA, I just went to the completely different place, right? So you do that for a while because you're just not sure. You're like, what am I doing? And then you start to break free of some of it, And now that I'm officially in postmenopause, I am walking this path that is my own, and it's wonderful. Wonderful. It's exciting. Is it scary at times? Of course. But I also have a really good understanding of this physiology and biology and all the knowledge. And my teachers, these are my wisdom teachers. These are my gurus. These are my support system, including the moon, including the nature, the trees, the flowers, you, others, Dr. Christine goes in there too. So I'm being supported to walk this path that is separate from the shu ha. Now I'm in the B. Yeah. So I don't know. I answered anything that you asked me, but.
Well, you said, first of all, there's 5 levels. Those are 3, right? There's 2 more.
No, there's only
3 levels. Okay, great.
Yeah. So, Japanese love 3s. We don't do too many things more than 3. Yeah.
Well, it's funny because with this whole breaking my elbow, it was a cycle of 30 years, 3 weeks to the day of my previous car accident. And it was 3 days before my 50th birthday. So I love the number 3 too. And I was like, oh, wow, quite the cycle. Everybody knows my story because I apply it so that they understand as well and can hopefully apply it to their own journey. So a couple of things you said was, I think I'm postmenopausal too. Here's my symptom. I stopped bleeding. It's been 6 months. Pretty clear that that's menopause.
Right.
And that's a point, right? We want to talk about that the only symptom of menstruation is bleeding. The only symptom of menopause is lack of bleeding. Outside of that, it's disease. And I want to talk about hormones and moon, particularly with you. I want to get down that. So hold on for that for a second. But in this stepping up to your own path, finding your own path within, as 2 menopausal women, I think for me, think, feel, and know that it's the wisdom within, right? That it's enough from the outside. Yet is that a journey we bring every woman and man to, regardless of their age, their cycle of life, to go through these stages as humanly as fast as possible, so that you can find this guidance within and you can find this rhythm within. And this rhythm, I had created a rhythm for myself every year to create a word of the year, and I had live it up until the second week of the year, and I was like, it's not the right word for me. I'm going to change it to soften. And 4 days later, I fell down and went boom. So I softened in the it's caused me to soften, and this is the cycle of what you're talking about. And I have demonstrated through this process to not listen to one other person about what to do about this other than me, regardless of it being a broken bone and a dislocated shoulder. Like, seems almost easy to fix mechanistically. But yet, vitalistically, I went, wait a second, this is happening to my spirit, happening for my spirit, happening for my physical body, happening for my emotional body, happening for my mental body. And I must look at it as a complete experience of understanding of what's happening. And as I go to heal it, to understand it from all those levels and to take all the advice from everybody, but to follow my own path and walk my own path, because nobody can live my life the way I live. And I wouldn't ask anybody to do what I'm doing. This is my journey. I wouldn't ask you to do the things I'm doing necessarily, but we're here to help you guide through that process. So I think that's what you're speaking of with this. I'm not right.
Shuhadi. Yeah.
I wasn't even close.
No, it's good. It's good. So Kelly, I have a question. So when you said the word, you said 2 weeks into it. Was it in January that you said that word?
Yeah.
Okay. So can I just tell you one thing? Okay. So January is usually, for me, is the 13th month of the last year. So I don't set anything up in January. And people are like, January, you got to do this, you're going to do that, you put yourself out there, and then you got to do this cleanse. And I'm like, I just look at them and go, no, I'm in the 13th month of the year, and I'm going to slow down, I'm going to reflect, I'm going to clean up my closet. I'm still doing all that in January. So I
heard you talk about it. It's one of the reasons I was willing to change my word, because it's also my birthday month. So January is a big month for me every year that I like. I always look back at the year and I set the intentions, and I was softer on my whole year, which is why I realized I wanted to change my word. And it was literally after I listened to one of your YouTubes when you talked about that, because really the Chinese New Year starting in February. And I was like, that's really true. It's the lunar cycle. And I'm more fascinated at this point because of divinity to look at the lunar, to look at the moon, look at the softness and the divinity versus the more physicality of the sun. If you could talk about your view of that and why you focus on the moon, I would love that, because right. And I have the same light, by the way. I love that light behind you, the moonlight. It's so cool.
I know, and I can change the colors on this. Depends. Like if we're going to have a blue moon or something, can you see that? Isn't that nice?
It's very.
So we'll just choose a color. I think purple might be nice today. Okay. Purple moon. Well, so, so the moon, right? So I grew up in a society that we use lunar cycles and the solar cycles. So there are many, many countries in the world that we are still holding on and balancing the lunar cycles and the solar cycles, because we have to go with the Gregorian calendar, right? Otherwise, the world isn't going to function. So we have to do that. So there's that component of it. But I grew up knowing when the moon cycles were. We celebrated moon cycles based on the Shinto. It's not a religion, but the practices and things like that. So moon was a huge part of my life. But what happens generally with immigrants like me is that we kind of leave it to the country that I came from, and then adjust to the country that I'm in, right? So I went full on ignoring the moon cycles for a long, long, long time. And then my perimenopause hit. And, I've been taking care of myself, right? As a functional nutritional therapist, I'm like eating right, taking these supplements, blah, blah, blah. And so physically, I was doing fine. I mean, relatively fine. No hot flashes, no like a major issue, sleep issues or anything like that. But there's something that was like, emotions started to kick in, and then the yearning to want to belong. So, and, belonging is a huge topic, and not belonging is a huge topic for many of the menopausal and postmenopausal women. But I think begins to happen around perimenopause, because this is when we live in a society currently under this society that all of us all across the not just the United States, but the globe, is that we don't exactly know how to navigate perimenopause, because it's one of those things that the people are just not talking about it much. It's like a hush hush. No, there's something weird is going to happen. We're aware of it, but we don't know how to talk about it, you know. So then that's when I started to feel really alone again. And that like a childhood emotion started to come up because the moon actually addresses age between 0 and 7. So there's a lot of that practically at the beginning of your life that set the stage for a lot of different patterns and your habitual way of looking at things and living that we've all done a lot of work on. They start to creep back up around perimenopause. So that started to come up and I started to feel like, oh my God, I don't belong anywhere. I don't belong in this group. I don't belong in that group. I don't belong here. And so I was really having a lot of these up and down of feeling lonely to mood swings to not sure how do I fit into this world again? And so, you know, that's like going to school with all Japanese kids with the straight black hair, with the perfect bangs. And then here I am with the curly strawberry blonde hair. It's like, oh my God, I don't belong again, you know, with freckles. So that was a really tough time. And one day, it was in 2019. It was right after the lunar eclipse. I was just looking outside and we have a place in the mountains and, you know, no other lights. So I was just looking out and then the moon started to literally talk to me. And she's like, you're going to learn about me. You're going to learn about how I am influencing all of you, but especially women. And I'm thinking to myself, what? Well, I have to learn again? And she's like, yes, I'm going to guide you through. So slowly I've been led by her energy, literally going, learn about this, learn about that. It's like these cycles that we're going to continue to carry on throughout the menopause into the post-menopause till the end of your last breath. You are going to be moving in and out with me, is what the moon was saying. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is where I belong. I belong to the cycles of the moon. And that's when I felt so grounded more than ever before. I stopped seeking for, you know, acceptance or belonging with a certain group or communities. I started to belong within my own being much more than ever before with her support. And so that's kind of is like my return back to where I come from, but also learning to really belong in my own fascia, you know, belong in my own flow, right? My lymphatic flow in my fascia, in my quantum field, in my easy water and, you know, structured water that is in me, because moon can actually impact all that too. So that's how I got started. And I do want to say maybe a couple more things about the circa-lunar cycles versus circadian rhythm. So as I'm sitting there and learning about the moon, so it's been several years now, I started to feel like, wow, there's so much emphasis on the solar cycles. I mean, of course, you know, I learned all kinds of things about the circadian rhythm. Of course, circadian rhythm is important. I've been telling all my clients, go outside, get the sunlight, first morning sunlight for decades, and, you know, how to really impact your pineal gland and how that's going to impact your melatonin production, blah, 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 blah. And, you know, really minimizing the nighttime lights. And those practices are out there. But what I started to notice is that almost everybody that is studying and showing some scientific studies, if you go to PubMed, you will find literally millions of articles on circadian rhythm. The circa-lunar cycles are just really a few, just really handful. But what's interesting is that I started to see that there's a direct cultural bias to studying the moon. So the moon is only studied so far, mostly by countries like Japan, Korea, China, India, Middle East. Russians love to study moon, and Eastern Europeans.
The older countries. It's more culture, more interested in the moon.
Right. And all those countries still use a Gregorian calendar and the lunar calendar. So we're still studying that and we're publishing all these amazing articles. But when it comes to the North American countries and Eastern and the Western Europe countries, they don't publish a lot of these things. And what I've come across is that scientists are actually fearful of being ridiculed by studying the lunar cycles. But when in fact, okay, I will finish this thought and I want to hear it out. I was thinking it too. I was like, if I came up to you, Kelly, and I said, Kelly, let's meet at 11 a.m. You'll be like, okay, that's nice. But 11 a.m. when, right? So the time is the circadian rhythm, okay? The day-to-day, moment-by-moment kind of thing, right? But if I say to you, let's meet on March 27th, on Saturday or something like that, that is the lunar side of the information. So we have to hold both. We have to have the time and also the calendar, because the moon controls the 4 seasons. Without the moon, we don't have the 4 seasons. Without the moon, we will be either extremely hot or extremely cold. So we don't have the weather patterns. We won't have these cycles throughout the 28 days of the month, or 29.5 days if you go from new moon to new moon. We won't have any of that. If we don't have moon, we don't have the evolutionary things that have happened for billions and billions and for years. For us to be here, we have to have the moon. So anyway, that's where my passion comes from. And then that's how I got into it.
That is so fascinating. I've always been fascinated in the moon, always, because I've always felt the moon somehow deep in my soul. Actually, I want to show you what's hanging in my window. Can you see that?
Yay!
But I've in the last 2 to 3 years, I've become more fascinated with it because I got a house near the beach, and I started to be involved with the tide, because in South Carolina, where we had a house for a few years, there's 2 tides a day. And it's just fascinating to me how in areas where there's a beach, everybody talks about the moon, and they have no problem with talking about it because they know it affects the tide. They know it affects the land. They know it affects all the things. Then I come up to Philadelphia area where I live, and if you talked about the moon, they think I'm just crazy. But if I went an hour and a half short to the Jersey Shore, they'd be like, well, yeah, the moon today is so the tide is so the weather is. I mean, and then when you talk about these ancient cultures versus the more modern cultures, I think, what is that fear from? Is it because it's the divine energy? It's the
feminine energy. Let's just call it that. Right. Yeah. We've been stuck in a lot of the yang and the solar and the, I'm not this masculine, feminine that has nothing to do with gender, right? But it's the right side, the left side, all those kind of things, right?
It's so fascinating. So
right. Right. And what, I think you'll find this even more interesting too, is that the 24-hour clock, the circadian rhythm clock, is in fact not fixed, but is instead plastic. Okay. So what that means is that we don't actually have a 24-hour clock that is set just on the 24 hours. Most people fluctuate throughout the month, and most people's 24-hour clock is actually longer than the 24 hours. It's more like the moon hours. So the moon is about cycles through 24 hours, and it's actually so 24.8 hours is the lunar cycles. And most people's circadian rhythm is about 24.5 hours. Okay. So it's not 24 hours. So to shove ourselves into the 24 hours and then just move through that isn't going to work. But I think, to me, averages out to about 24 hours if you look at the 29.5 days straight. So for instance, like during the full moon, we don't sleep much. In fact, we sleep about 45 minutes to 75 minutes less, okay, leading up to the full moon. So about 3 to 5 days prior to that, our melatonin level goes way down. So, that's the time that we are not sleeping as much. And the lunar sensor, it's called the lunar sensor, but it's the pineal gland, has been called the lunar sensor. And I know, and it's so sensitive to actually the energetic fields and the gravitational force of the moon. Okay.
Well, I can say I had, when I was in college, I had absolute insomnia, like 3 years, didn't sleep. I was on Vicodin, Flexerol from a car accident, still wasn't sleeping, like crazy what I was taking, looking back, and like, I remember laying in bed just going, oh, okay, well, tomorrow I'll just get up and go do my thing. All the years in bioregulatory medicine, and I've done all the things. And Ian has energetically treated me for the moon, every phase of the moon, on allergy elimination. We have done eye mates on the moon. We have tried every single thing. And I finally, about 3 years ago, just go, you know what? I'm just going to let go of it. The bottom line is the day before the full moon, I'm not going to sleep. The day of the full moon, not going to sleep. The day after the full moon, not going to sleep much. And I'm just going to let go of it because I can't control. There are certain things I can, certain things I can't control. And acceptance, I think, is one of the things we wanted to talk about, was being in alignment with what's happening and not fighting it so much.
Right.
I mean, we're fight it. It'll catch you somewhere because your lesson's coming to you some way.
It does. And I think coming back to that approach, right? It's like a right-handed approach. It's like so right, forceful, approach to go, I got to fix this. I got to sleep all the time. Like 29.5 days, the moon cycles, I must sleep every day at 8 hours. And then I'm going to wake up refreshed every day. It's like, no, I started telling women and mothers that this happens to children too. In fact, the children are so sensitive to the lunar cycles that their melatonin level is going down also. So they get a little more active around leading up to the full moon. And, depending on the child, but it might last past the full moon period as well, but generally like ramping up to the full moon. And this is a study that just came out last April that basically, as young as they studied 2-year-olds up to about 6-year-olds, and they saw huge fluctuations in their sleep patterns based on the lunar cycles. So I just tell moms and dads, I'm like, you know what? Just let the kid have some issues here. It's okay. But another thing that you have to be careful about is okay, lack of sleep means you're going to have blood sugar dysregulation the next day. You might have a little bit of mood swings, because the mood swings go up and down quite a bit leading up to the full moon. So be aware of that with your child, with yourself too. So you don't bump up with each other and then, start fighting around that time. I mean, chaos can happen around full moon. Yes.
Well, I mean, that's why hospitals and so forth, right? There's lunacy, there's a whole thing about that. But also with kids, thank you for bringing up kids so much, Masami, because this whole year for me is focusing on heart rate variability and scar therapy and kiddos, and teaching not only how we treat ourselves, but our kids. And I think there's such and I am a recovering, I don't even know, intense. Silas might have other things to say about this. I'm a recovering controlling mom. He might have other things to say about that. But it has been such a lesson, this parenting thing, to learn his cycles versus my forcing, you got to do these certain things in him, and noticing when he is just not going to sleep. So I put him to bed at our kid's just never taken a nap. I could tell you maybe 5 times, he's 11 years old, 5 times in his life he's ever taken a nap.
He's not going to.
And he's not gonna. And I don't either. I don't require a lot of sleep. So why are we forcing this kid? That's my kid. And he's half fine too, but he got that side of me for sure. He doesn't relax. He doesn't need a lot of sleep. He doesn't, he relaxes, but in a different way than, So
it does help to know that the leading up to the full moon, the kiddos are going to have a hard time sleeping. But this is a really good time for connecting with communities. So have a play date set up, have the kids go out and climb every tree in a park, park or whatever, get them moving. So they're using up some of the excess energy that's building up, because the energy gets built up leading up to the full moon. So it's like a double whammy. If you don't move the kids, they're not going to sleep. Their, blood sugar is going to be dysregulated the next day. They could be cranky, right? So this is where you want to play around. Put it on the calendar. If you don't want to know all 4 phases or 8 phases of the moon, just put down at least the new moon and the full moon. And the new moon is a really good time. It's one of the things that the sleep we can do is that we can catch up to sleep. There are a lot of things in the world that we cannot catch up to, but the sleep is the one thing that we can actually catch up to. So For me, it's like instead of creating more biohacking methods and getting irritated by the fact that you can't sleep, I say full moon journal next to your bedside and start journaling, put some dreams, because you're going to have more vivid dreams. And one more thing that's really interesting about the full moon is that, so the melatonin level goes down, then the body adjusts to having a little more serotonin level. Okay. So serotonin level goes up as we're heading to the full moon. And the serotonin is very exciting to the parasites and other organisms in your gut, okay, in your whole body too, in the mind too. But they can get a little excited and they can get wiggly, like they start moving through your whole system. So we're not just not sleeping because of the lunar cycles, but we're having the melatonin drop that increases the serotonin levels. Serotonin can excite the parasites. So, I would say that leading up to the full moon, this is a great way to figure out, I do have some parasitic stuff, which is everybody does. Come on, okay? If you ate a bowl of salad, you're going to have parasites. But again, not to scare you, but, something maybe you can look into and say, you know what, that's happening to me. Oh, no. Then maybe during the new moon, you can do some parasitic, protocols type of thing, and maybe use some herbs, maybe use oregano oils, some other things to maybe address that, right? So it's nice to know these cycles.
Absolutely. And it is about cultivating ourselves versus raising us to be all alike and finding our own way. So I'm curious, are there foods that you would, especially with kiddos, to help regulate their blood sugars? And I know for me, maybe it's because I'm not sleeping too, but I definitely crave food when I'm not sleeping. And it's typically more the carbs than it is the protein.
Yeah. So this is where you will want to work a little bit. This is the SHU, HA, D. Okay. So 3 stages, right? The basic needs, right? We all know that if we go for the carbs, even though it's an easy thing to kind of throw into your mouth and it's a quick glucose, shots for the brain, but what you want to do is like, how do I feed myself a little bit more protein, and in complex carbohydrates instead of like a simple crackers and things like that, right? And I would actually, leading up to about a week before the full moon, really address the protein intake and the fat intake. But here's the thing is that we're going to need a little bit more hydrochloric acid or a support for digestion leading up to the full moon, because this is what's going to balance your blood sugar, right? Eating more protein and fats are going to balance your blood sugar, but also we do need a little bit more hydrochloric acid support during that time.
So break down the excess protein and fats that we're eating to have more of it and acid to break that down.
Right. And then so this happens for kiddos too, but also postmenopausal women and menopausal women, because our hydrochloric acid productions, betaine hydrochloric acid productions do go down as we go into our postmenopause more and more. So the hypochlorhydria, that's the low stomach acid, but gastric reflux issues, so acid reflux kind of thing, and indigestions and bloating and constipation. Those are really common for postmenopausal women, but you may actually see your child, your kids having constipation or digestive issues leading up to the full moon. So this is when you can say, let's do a little bit more like a sea salt. Having a little sea salt can really actually bring up the stomach acid. When I work with little kids, I actually work with mothers to get the kids to take a little bit of liquid zinc. So the one that I use is from Biotics called aqueous zinc. It's just a 2% solution, so it's really diluted. But it's a great way to kind of check with your zinc levels. But when the kids are having bloating, constipation, digestion is really tough. And not only the moon cycles, but they're just tossing and turning and can't sleep, and they're getting really farty and things like that. Doing the aqueous zinc or the liquid zinc, about a tablespoon or so. For anybody, I would say 5 and older, a tablespoon is good. For adult bodies, 2 tablespoons of that be great. You can also take the, zinc as a tablets or supplements, or even suck on it, or, any of those things would be fine. But that can be really helpful. And a sea salt, so stomach acid requires basic ingredients like zinc, the sodium, so basically the sea salt, and plenty of hydration, so purified water, right? With the minerals added, those would be important. But also B1 is extremely important for making your own hydrochloric acid. But these days, I mean, I work with kids that, they're coming into this world not digesting life, because they're coming into very stressful situations. The mother's been stressed, but also just biochemically, they're just really dialed down in their own abilities to digest really stressors that are thrown at them.
Well, I mean, so on that subject, wouldn't you say partially to adults as well that it's the frequency that all of the frequencies, the increase of frequencies that we're exposed to has muted out some of our innate frequencies that, and if you could speak to that in the fascia and how that all plays together with the moon, I would love for you to unwind that little piece of fabric.
But that's a tough question, actually. Yeah. I mean, where do I start? I might ask you that same question back, and then maybe I'll think of something. So I'm going to throw it back at you.
Well, I mean, for me, so as the body is having to process all these frequencies, when I grew up and Silas is 11, and when I was 11, not even close to the same amount of information that I had to process on a daily basis, not only just knowledge, but also, frequencies from different lights and microwaves and, the internet waves and all of that, but also in our homes. It's just a very different experience than the home I grew up in and what we are exposed to on a frequency level that the body just has to process. It has to compensate. And if it can't, then it starts to see disease and illness. And that's what I see with these kiddos is why they're so overwhelmed and why adults are so overwhelmed is that in the last 40 years, it's exponential what this body's had to process. And the fascia is the frequency fabric of the body that's actually receiving and sending those signals from the fascia and the heart, and then it's in the water, the lymphatics of the body, it's magnifying that frequency. And then if the oxygen can get everywhere, that's great because then it creates a flow, so it moves out what it doesn't need, and then we structure the water to hold on to what we do need, and then the energy flows at the speed of light and sound if everything goes really, really well. And that's the flow state. But with so much that we're up against, it becomes part of our human experience, as far as I'm concerned, to learn how to take care of the body, to open up that fascia, get that lymph flow, and to get oxygen more in the body, and to then be more aware of these lunar and circadian rhythms of the body and not so patterned. Because what we found from heart rate variability is that to have the most expansive heart rate variability is not have a patterned heart, but to have a variable, a truly never ever changing, rather ever evolving heart rhythm that is based upon whatever frequencies we're up against. And these little kiddos are struggling to do that, to digest, as you say, all of life, because their lymph, yes, has to circulate it, but then the liver has to literally catch it all and digest all of life in our small intestines, which are part of our lymphatic system. And then we excrete out, we breathe out more toxicants, but we poop, pee, and sweat. And these livers are just overworked from the moment that we're conceived. In all honesty, I mean, I don't mean to be like a fatalist or anything, but the bottom line is my kid's life expectancy in his entire generation is less than our life expectancy because perhaps we've been doing it the wrong way. Mm-hmm. And what we're here to show you is the right way on the Flow podcast and on Masami's YouTube channel and all the things that she has to offer, because this is not as difficult as you think. It's just that we've never been informed and understand, or this information's been held from us, perhaps, who knows? But this is the wisdom of nature that we've been disconnected from. That was one of the first things you said, was the connection is the key to this lunar cycle. So that's my, this is my podcast. I interview you. You're not supposed to ask me questions.
Oh, I love it though. I wanted to ask you that question, so I love it. Well, so yeah, the fascial connection, I'm trying to make that with the moon cycles as well. And when's a good time to really work on the fascial level too? Obviously the fascia movements is very important, right? I mean, children are just sitting too much these days. I mean, all adults too, right? And that messes up our hormones quite a bit. So for postmenopausal women, when you sit longer than 3 hours at a time, you are actually going to be increasing the xenoestrogen level and then lowering the production of your good estrogen level, so there's that, right? So the movements are going to be important. Red light therapy, I think, is really, really one of those things that we all need to be doing all across the board for at any age. I'm doing red light therapy all the time. Like anytime between my clients, I got the red light things. I'm doing it all over my body and the belly and all that. One of the things that you can do so that, and I'll give you a couple of tools that anybody can do. Okay. But first, I look at fascia as like the paper, each page of your book. That's like somewhat pre-written. So your history is lodged in there. Your ancestral history is in there. Your mother's history is in there. Your great-great-grandmother's history is in there. The Earth's history is in there. So you're kind of like reading your book every day going, oh my God, I have layers and layers and layers. As we get older, these papers kind of start to stick together. They're thicker and thicker and thicker. So the kids might come with a little bit of thinner book, but, think of like old, the phone book, that's kind of what starts to happen as we get older. So we need to peel away those pages, right? And I always think of like book itself as like bones, because, bones are now seen as the fascia, right? It's the extension of the fascia. When you put fascia together, and then put it together in the solid form-ish, that's bones. So I always think of like we are walking books, and these kids are already given pre-written pages when they come in because we inherit a lot of the DNA and in the cellular memories. They're all in there on the pages. So, movements, a must, okay? I think doing things like rolling on like the ball, like fascial ball, block therapy, you use it, do whatever you need to do that. A little bit of compression, sitting with it, all those are great. But one of the things that we can all benefit from doing is moonbathing. Okay, so I'm going to go into the Ayurvedic practice called moonbathing. And moonbathing is done around the full moon. So take a look at your calendar and say, we're going to do this as a family, and I meet.
What's last night as we record this? How many days can you do it?
So you can do 2 days before and then even 2 days after.
Okay, keep going. I was just personally curious because I'm moonbathing tonight. So what am I doing?
So it's a very healing practice. It absorbs the moonlight. So the moonlight is about 15% of the solar light, but it's got the infrared in there. So I was actually just talking to Gina Bria. I'm sure you know her, right? And then we're saying that the moonlight must be helpful for our easy water, to increase and grow our, water inside this gel-like crystalline structure of who we are. And then the answer is yes. Okay. So they've done a lot of studies on plants. And there's this like scientist in the 60s and the 70s that would study like peppermint leaves or something like that at the space station, okay, where there's no sunlight coming in. But the leaves will grow and then expand and reach horizontally and vertically depending on the lunar cycles, okay? So we're all like expanding and reaching externally or horizontally, vertically throughout the whole month. I'm not saying we're peppermint leaves, but we do have the similar, or they are our ancestors too. We only think of ancestors as human beings, and we have to think of ancestors as 4 elements, depending on which school of thoughts you come from. The earth is your ancestors, the wind, the ether, those are our elements that are part of who we are, right? So during the moon bathing, during a full moon, you actually do want to go out there naked if you can, but if you don't want to do that as a family event, okay, you can put on the shorts or whatever, but you want to expose the belly, okay? So the cisterna-chyli, that spot, is actually called in Ayurveda and in the ancient yogic practice, and a lot of people don't know this chakra, but it's called the 3.5 chakra, okay? And it's between the third and the fourth chakra. There's an in-between chakra, and it sits right at the cisterna right there. Isn't it amazing? And that is the flow of the down below and above. As you know, you can go into it more. You can geek out with me.
I didn't know that. That's so fascinating to me. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that chakra is orangish reddish color. Okay. According to the ancient yogis. And it's called the wish-fulfilling tree. So when you study the liver and then you learn the hepatic portal veins, okay, that's connected to rooted. I mean, think of it's like a roots going down to different organs, kidneys, the bladder, the everywhere, in the colon, the small intestine, they're sucking the nutrients, all the nutrients and all the toxins come back to the liver. Liver clears it up and sends it through think of the wish-fulfilling tree's trunk, okay, and feeds into the branches of the tree, which is the fourth chakra, your heart center, right? So right in that squeezed space, you want to get the full moon on there. So getting that third chakra, 3.5 chakra, that area be exposed to the lunar light can be very helpful in terms of not just the flow of the lymphatic system, but also, as you know, that area is quite bound up for most people in terms of our memories, our traumas, and what holds those memories and traumas? Fascia, right? So you could be doing, all kinds of work, pressure points, or you could be sitting on the block therapy, or you can do a ball, whatever. That's fine. But sometimes I think the fascia has the abilities to let go when we stop doing so much to it also, right? So letting the lunar lights support our fascia in releasing that. And then that can be very soothing for menopausal symptoms, actually. So the moon bathing's been used for hundreds, thousands of years in places like India and in places like Japan to soothe the menopausal symptoms because the lunar energy is cooling. It's the yin. So when we're hot and moods are all over the place because as we go into the full moon, we could get hot-headed. Doing the moon bathing can be really, really calming and relaxing to all of us family members, So, and it can optimize your fertility. If you're still, wanting to get pregnant, this can be really good. It's a very balancing and harmonizing to your inflammatory systems in your body. And, the inflammation gets communicated through the fascia too. So I do think this could be a really nice healing practice. You can also put like a glass of water with a little pinch of sea salt and let the moonlight get absorbed for that night and then have a little sip of that, after the moon bathing. So that's my answer to the fascia question, but it's totally different probably.
No, I love, thank you so much. I love that. First of all, moon bathing is so beautiful. And I love this cooling energy because I think so many people, as you spoke to, have inflammation, right? I mean, think about heat in the body is inflammation and that's stress, whether that's emotional stress or mental stress or physical stress. Inflammation is the killer, stress is the killer, and we need to cool off the body from all this excess heat. And I have had a lot of excess heat with this inflammation of this injury. And so the whole concept of cooling sounds absolutely amazing. And then secondly, I just want to speak to, optimizing for fertility is fabulous because it puts you in this rhythm with your divinity, with your femininity. And it's fascinating that both for menopausal and for fertility, the solution, if you will, the remedy, the shift is to align with the frequency so that whatever path we're in, whether that's fertility path or menopause path, it will align for us and help us optimize that. And that just, once again, speaks to the beauty of this life that we get to live and how we understand the body, that it's so beautiful that we just need to facilitate its own healing. And that the moon is something like fascia and lymph that's often forgotten about, that has not been given enough credit, that is shunned in even cultures, and that maybe we should start to look a little bit more at that moon and play with the moon. And moon water is something I haven't talked about in years, but I definitely would recommend doing this. I would also recommend living in the Northeast. You don't fill it all the way this time of year and you lit it, but do not fill it up all the way, because I cracked a couple mason jars before I was like, don't fill it up all the way. But
I love actually putting the ghee. I usually make ghee during this time around the full moon, and put the ghee by the window cells so that it can absorb some of the moonlight into your homemade ghee too. And I want to say just one more thing about the fertility is that as post-menopause, menopause, women like us, fertility isn't always about actually, getting pregnant and having a child, but it's about what are you, I put down, get pregnant with your creativity, get pregnant with your new ideas, maybe things that you've been kind of chewing on. You get to finally start to digest that. That's what this time is. So the moon bathing isn't just for, healing the inflammation and all that, but it's like getting pregnant, right? I don't know, pregnanted is the word, but being pregnant. By the
new idea.
Yes. Moonlight, can give us this like a light to say, go for it. Start to hold that idea and hold it long enough so that you can birth it. Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for this insight and beauty into this reflective nature that is constantly there, with Sound of Soul, which I still have yet for you to experience. I'm so looking forward to you finally experiencing that. But it's the opportunity first to feel a reflection from within our heart variability. And the moon is another way to look at that reflection of life, and to get these two things in alignment is just so beautiful. And I just want to give another shout out to Dr. Christine, because as she always does, she connects people that are so aligned. And she had us both part of her hormone and healing class. And when we finally met, it was like we couldn't stop touching each other. It was like
we're working on our fascia a lot, and you were helping me with my constipation that day. So
yes, we were just like very touchy feely and really like in love with each other. But I could understand all of a sudden when we started talking, I was like, Christine, this is like a match made in heaven. Like we do it differently, but we have the same philosophy, the same approach, because it's the truth, I would say, and
yes,
the same, and Christine the same. It's like we understand this divine being within, and you are such a goddess of the divine. And I before we go, I have two questions. One is, what are your favorite 3 books? Because I'm selfishly asking that for myself. And all the community will be able to hear the answer. But I would also
my goodness.
Are your favorite 3 books, Masami? Because what I need is to buy another freaking book. But,
Okay, so I know it's like I just started reading this moon book too, and then the name is slipping, so I will have to give it to you a little later. But I will tell you one book that is I have so many books, and I'm my goodness, I cannot believe that I can't just say it. But it's the book. It's a children's book, and it's called Swimmy, and so Swimmy by Leo Leone.
Okay.
I know, and it's a children's book, and I might not have 2 other ones that I can just tell you right at this moment, but I have so many, but I think another one that might be good is and it's more of a the natural but the body-based book, but the iodine book, it's called Dr. Brownstein's book called Why Do We Need Iodine and Why We Cannot Live Without It. That's a really good book, yeah, it's a really good one. And then iodine gets fluctuated through the moon cycles as well, so that's a good one to look at.
One of my doctor friends is very convinced and been trying to prove it in a lab with blood work for about 10 years that the reason that we're so iodine deficient and why people react so much to iodine is because it mobilizes mercury, which would make sense because it really affects the moon, and the moon's very affected by mercury. Mercury very much affects the moon.
You got it. And then the low stomach acid will impact also that too, the absorption of iodine as well. Minerals really have a hard time absorbing. So that's why I make sure leading up to the full moon that you're supporting your digestion through using digestive enzymes, but also hydrochloric acid, right?
And is fermented food another form of hydrochloric acid, or would you just give straight up HCl? You just give straight up?
No, the fermented foods, you might even have a hard time digesting it because you have a low stomach acid, and I do love extracted apple cider vinegar. So it's not the apple cider vinegar straight up, because that can be really a little tough on the people. And then if you have histamine reactions or something like that, it can be a little bit tough, or mast cell, reactions as well. So I don't go for that, but extracted apple cider vinegar. And I use the company called Zorex, and it's called HCl Complete. That one has been amazing for sensitive people. It's been amazing for empaths. I straddle between the spiritual communities and the science communities. So I work with a lot of really sensitive empaths, and they do really well with that particular supplement. But I would say, upping the B1, like I said, zinc, sea salt, and water. And then getting a little L-tyrosine can be really good, actually, for getting the stomach acid to go up. So that's another thing. And I was going to say something.
The third book.
Yeah. So the third book that I'm kind of going, there are about 3 other books that I really just kind of have thought about. So, but one is a cookbook, and it's a really boring cookbook. I'm just telling you, it's like a dictionary. Okay. But it's called Nourishing Traditions.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah. By Sally, right? And then
it's really not it has recipes in it, but I wouldn't call it a cookbook. It is exactly what you said. It's a resource book for understanding how to live with food as your medicine, with a bunch of recipes. And yeah, it's a standard. I haven't thought about that in years, although it sits in my kitchen. So
yeah. So sometimes, occasionally, just flip through it; it'll be good. And then the other one is that it's completely nothing to do with health, but he was, bless his heart, he died too young. But his name was John O'Donohue, and his book called "To Bless the Space Between Us." To bless the space between us. And this is a beautiful book by John O'Donohue. And it's, he was a poet, and David White was a best friend of him too. So David White's poems are amazing too. I love poetry, from Rumi to Hafiz to all those people too, and haiku too. But the John O'Donohue's, this is a book of blessings. So you can open up any page you like, and it's just his blessings to us, to natures, to the sky, to the moon, to the ancestors. So you can just open up any page, and he may have just a 1 page of blessings or 3 pages of blessings. But it's a wonderful thing to just flip open. And he was an Irish poet that really made a difference in a lot of people's lives.
That's a perfect book to end with, because you're kind of like the book of poetry that you can just open up on any one subject and get anywhere from a page to a full chapter of information. Truly, you are such a gift and a blessing to us and to this community. And I want people to know where to find you and how to find you. I follow her on YouTube. I kind of stalk her, even though I actually had Ian Listener on a couple months ago. And it was the one that we were just talking about. It was like this month, actually. This has just lengthened my time of perception, but he listened to it. I was like, yeah, I actually know her. She's my friend. It was very funny, because Silas has this whole thing with me, because I watched my niece on basketball. It's like, oh, I know her, but it's your YouTube channel is amazing. So share with them how they can find you and follow you.
Yes. So I don't have a whole lot of social media. I mainly focus on the YouTube, because that's what I love. So I told you at the beginning, it's this idea of shuhadi. I'm in this different path, and I decided Instagram is not my thing, So I just do YouTube. So just go to Masami Covey and look up YouTube. And then I'm the only Masami Covey in this world so far, right? So that's me there. And then you can just go to masamicovey.com, and that'll be my website. And I always post lots of different videos and information and PDFs and things like that on there, different supplement protocols and different things that I'm noticing. So there are a lot of resources in my website too that you can click on and watch different videos. I have a lot of videos on hormones as well, how to support like receptor sites, to clean out the receptor sites. And as a side note, receptor sites clean up better heading into the new moon. Yeah. So that's when you can do a little bit of like a cleaning out the system before you begin to add the light back on. Right. So.
And if you'd like to work with her, feel free. Like, I highly support working with Masami 100%. I think she's a phenomenal practitioner, and her goal is very aligned with True Wellness, is that her job is to help you be the best practitioner while she guides you along the way. And I know a lot of our client base have asked about hormone issues. And one of the things Genevieve and I are working on right now is a protocol in our center to prove putting somebody in the flow state actually improves their hormones. And to that end, I think that maybe in the fall, I'd love to look at maybe doing a program with you and helping our community with their hormones and doing something at the fall, the change of the seasons. I just feel like that feels very organic, by the way. My whole team.
Oh, I love it.
What are you talking about? Well,
it's all about the flow, right? It's all about the flow. But why can't, we can't live flow only based on 24-hour cycles. We just can't. Yeah. So get back into the flow
with math, because I think part of what I'm teaching with HRV this year and frequency and getting people to really understand it's how important math is, by the way, while I'm also helping stylists understand math. And it's the foundation of really realizing the patterns of life, that they're not rigid patterns, but they are patterns, and to figure out the patterns so that we can flow within them and work with them. Just like astrology, it's not I'm succumb to them, or the moon, I'm not succumb to it, but I'm not going to fight it either. And I'm not going to work against myself. Like, once I know it, to go, well, that's not going to be a day I'm going to get a lot of rest because it's the full moon, but the new moon, that might be when I take a vacation.
Right. And get yourself a really nice journal and just call it the full moon journal. Who knows what's going to come to you, and vivid dreams are going to come to you. And maybe this is when you get to speak to the inner knowing space as well as your ancestors. To me, it's an exciting time, instead of lying there just hating yourself that you can't sleep. And it's like, I should be taking this and I should be doing that. It's like, just hang up. Maybe just get up and have a little glass of water with the full moon and just speak to her, because she is looking for you. And I think when we can live with the cycles of the moon, this is when the quantum cohesiveness, right? That we talk about moving like a school of fish can start to happen. And I believe that when women begin to move as the school of fish, this is when the world can change. And that's the Leone's book, the Swimmy book. It's all about
narwhals and doing it. I'm really convinced that we're a bunch of narwhals.
Yes, we are.
Because we're a bunch of narwhal schooling fish, and we're breaking through the glass. The women are breaking through the glass ceiling, taking our boniest part of our bodies and breaking through that glass ceiling. Thank you. That was the perfect summary to this podcast.
That's what we're doing. Let's swim together as a school of
community. Building community.
Right. You can't do this alone. Don't do this alone. Don't swim in the great big ocean, of all is plasma, right? Everything is water. So we're swimming in that together. But if we can synchronize it together as women, I think we can bring world peace. Okay. We can bring down the temperatures of this heating earth, and we can bring true healing to this Mother Gaia. I really believe that if we can synchronize and swim together.
Agreed. And I was going to ask what your dream is, but I think we just know it. And thank you so much. I am so glad that our schooling fish have started to swim together, because like a narwhal, when they come up against another school, they can't go in opposite directions because the channels are so thin that they know they must school together. So they combine and they collaborate together. The narwhal and Christine's little thing a few years ago, and it's just evolving. So yes, now I've had somebody adopt me in Norwal, and I have a suit, if you saw, with this whole thing with the Norwal. So it's all about bringing our communities together. And thank you so much for being a part of our community and sharing all your wisdom and your space. And everybody is now in love with you, as I am, and I'm sure they're all going to continue to enjoy following you. So thank you so much, my love. I look forward to hugging you soon.
Yes, me too.
And thank you all for listening. And if this resonates with you, please share it with your friends, as always. And we love your comments. I truly do read them, or they're read to me, one or the other. And I respond back to them, or they responded back for me with my words, though. And so I really do appreciate every one of you. And thank you for listening to this episode of The Flow. See you next time.